I was watching Tony Blinken's exchange with Thomas Friedman, real hardball interviewer at Davos. All the like the few Zionists that are like presentable to the world are in Davos right now, like President Isaac Herzog. And there was a whole panel on anti-Semitism. Then Blinken with Kamala Harris's husband. Then Blinken appears with Thomas Friedman. And at one point, Tony Blinken seems to address us and others who are countering a lot of the propaganda around October 7th, and basically says, we're a bunch of truthers who are inventing the idea that October 7th never happened and that it needs to be countered. I'll try to find video of that. We have some other video from his appearance there. And, it was a great acting job by Tony Blinken. It actually wasn't. If you watch Tony Blinken, he seems to be like one of the most nervous, uncharismatic secretaries of state I can remember since, like, I don't know, Warren Christopher, like people we forgot about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this isn't a media age when you have to be on social media all the time. I don't remember like Rex Tillerson looking like a deer in the headlights when he was having an exchange with a softball journalist like Tom Friedman. But here's Blinken sort of feigning concern for the people of Gaza. Not concern, but actually expressing horror at what's being done to them.
Do Jewish lives matter more than Palestinian and Muslim lives?
Do Jewish lives matter more than Palestinian lives?
Incredible asymmetry in casualties. And I've been asked that. I want to give you a chance to respond to that.
No. Period. For me, I think for so many of us, what we're seeing every single day in Gaza is gut-wrenching. And the suffering we're seeing among innocent men, women, and children breaks my heart. The question is, what is to be done?
Sorry about the volume. We're going to work on that in the future. But Blinken is basically saying the suffering that I see among innocent people is breaking my heart. And the question is, what is to be done? And he seems, Aaron, like he couldn't possibly be involved in anything genocidal or criminal. I mean, he's just such a shy, retiring personality, very nebbishy looking. Yeah. He has this cold, dead stare. His voice is kind of trembling. He's sitting forward and he doesn't look at the audience at any point. Whereas Tom Friedman, I mean, that's his world. Davos is like his ski lodge.
Oh, yeah.
He's just chilling.
Yeah. He's pumped to be there.
Yeah.
Blinken is just constantly scared. And then he asked the question, what is to be done, as if he's asking some sort of like inscrutable philosophical question. What is to be done? I don't know. This is the guy who is rushing tank shells to Israel, bypassing Congress, blocking all calls for a ceasefire. He was very involved in the effort to water down any UN Security Council resolution that passed. So he's totally invested in prolonging the genocide. And then he pretends when he gets, questioned about it to be sort of helpless, to be a bystander.
Yeah. And, he just goes on to kind of gaslight the audience into believing that there's nothing that he can do. It's like, O.J. Simpson recounting with horror how he found a beheaded Ron Goldman and a murdered Nicole Brown Simpson outside his home. And he just was completely shocked to find them there. What is to be done about this? Well, certainly no one can be prosecuted for it. No one can be held accountable. That's the last thing we want. We shouldn't look for the criminal. And, it might not even be the right parallel or metaphor, because we're talking about a serial killer who keeps killing and kills and kills and kills. Like while we're talking right now, people are being massacred in the Gaza Strip for sure. And Blinken's whole appearance, just like his whole anti-diplomacy tour throughout the Middle East that he's just returned from, was designed to postpone and prolong Israel's genocidal rampage in Gaza, while he claims that He's trying to prevent escalation.
Yeah.
So this is sociopathic.
And what's one of his main tools of doing it? What's one of his main tools of doing that now? Now he's sort of going on. He's doing this familiar U.S. dance of talking about, okay, we need to come up with a plan for a future Palestinian state. It's always like this Palestinian state is somewhere in the distance. It's off there. It's somewhere, but we can't quite see it. But we need to look towards the horizon. That's what he's doing now by going around the Middle East and talking about this fictional Palestinian state that he wants to help create. And meanwhile, Netanyahu is such a fanatic; he can't even help give Blinken that cover. He said outright, there won't be a Palestinian state because Israel will control everything from the river to the sea. And then Blinken has to pretend as if Netanyahu is not saying that either, and act as if Netanyahu is somehow against his own vision, when really Netanyahu just making his own cover story more inconvenient.
Yeah, this was an amazing moment in international diplomacy because Netanyahu finally said at a really opportune time, or you could say inopportune, what he'd always said in private and what everyone knew. And the translation is amazing too. This is the I-24 translation from the channel that is sponsored by the Israeli Foreign Ministry.
For 30 years, I am very consistent, and I'm saying something very simple. This conflict is not on the lack of a state of Palestinian, but the existence of a state, the Jewish state. Every area that we evacuate, we receive terrible terror against that. It happened in South Lebanon, in Gaza, and also Judea and Samaria, which we did it. And therefore, I clarify that in any other arrangement, in the future, the state of Israel has to control on the entire area from the river to the sea. This is what happens when you have sovereignty. This truth I say to our American friends. And I also stopped the attempt to impose us a reality that will jeopardize us. A prime minister in Israel has to be able to say no, even to the best of friends.
So he directs that at Blinken and Biden. He says this is to our American friends. He says it right to him.
Yeah. But he's being more honest because they have the same policy. If any U.S. administration wanted a Palestinian state, they could have taken up the multiple opportunities that there were, including from Hamas, which at one point accepted it. But they don't. They believe in Israeli control from the river to the sea. They just don't want to admit it.
Every prime minister has always believed in that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Yitzhak Rabin, shortly before he was killed, he said that he was considered the Israeli father of the so-called peace process. He said that we envision less than a state for Palestine. So
yeah, that was his last speech to the Knesset.
Yeah. But what's he talking about with South Lebanon?
Well, that's an amazing little comment.
Yeah.
He's saying that we left South Lebanon. Yeah. Basically, Hezbollah pushed them out of South Lebanon in 2000 following the whole failure of Operation Grapes of Wrath. They'd always been trying to take it because they want to get up to the Litani River. They say they want to create a security buffer for their northern communities, and there's some truth to that, but they also want the Litani River as a water supply, just like they're stealing all the water from the Jordan River. And they failed. But the reality is that in the early 1980s, when Israel first invaded South Lebanon, there was no Hezbollah.
Yeah,
there wasn't any seeds of it in the minds of Israeli intelligence. And when the military went in, they actually believed that the Shia would be their allies against the secular and Marxist-Leninist resistance that was dominating the Palestinian refugee camps at the time. And they viciously abused the Shia population to the point where they got together and started to organize. Also, the Iranian Revolution happened. They actually helped inspire it in many ways. And so his thinking is upside down. It's like, because you occupied South Lebanon, because you invaded, you have this resistance force. It's not because you left. And that's what he's saying about the West Bank. So he's directing that right to Blinken. He's just, he's on the phone every day with Biden. And it shows how weak the U.S. is in standing up to Israel, that Netanyahu can just get away with saying that. While Blinken's running around saying, we believe a two-state solution is the answer. I mean, he takes us for a joke.
And, it's really important to point out what Netanyahu is saying is nothing new. It's not as if this view is unique to him. It's in the charter of his own party, the Likud party, from 1977. 10 years before Hamas was even founded. It says that between the sea and Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. Yep. And even though the Labor Party, the other faction of the Israeli leadership, never had the same thing in its charter, they had the same view, basically. They just didn't want to admit it. That was the difference between Labor and Likud when it comes to Palestinians. Likud admitted their supremacist colonial goals. Labor pretended sometimes that they actually cared about peace during the so-called peace process. But this is, that's Israel. And that's the Israel that the U.S., every administration has backed for all of its existence.
So this is one of the most revealing exchanges at the State Department in a while, relating to that, relating to the tail kind of wagging the dog. Matt Miller, the spokesman, is asked about Netanyahu explicitly opposing a state, rubbing it in the American faces. I turned up the speed here.
Solution to all your problems. Are you also offering some kind of pressure, or what is it that you're actually saying to the Israelis we will do if you don't accept, or are you just...
Are you offering any pressure?
Give them an opportunity and they didn't take it.
I don't think we need to offer any kind of pressure. The pressure is reality. The pressure is the reality that I just laid out. That without...
But I need to play that again.
We will do if you don't accept, or are you just going to hold your hands up and say, well, we gave them an opportunity and they didn't take it?
I don't think we need to offer any kind of pressure. The pressure is reality. The pressure is the reality that I just laid out, that without a tangible path to the establishment of a Palestinian state, there are no other partners in the region who are going to step forward and help with the reconstruction of Gaza. There are no other partners in the region who are going to step forward and help establish Palestinian-led governance of Gaza. There are no other partners in the region who are going to step forward and integrate with Israel and make further assurances about Israel's long-term security. So that's just the reality. It's not the United States exerting pressure or not. It's the reality of the situation that Israel faces.
So basically, we're not exerting any pressure. We don't need to put pressure on Israel. Things will just fall into place through inertia, through the magical power of the universe. And maybe Saudi Arabia will just step up and do something on our behalf. And do you think Israel cares about reconstruction in Gaza? I mean,
no. I mean, they only care about building settlements for themselves, for the parts they want to take over again. That's the only reconstruction they care about. And that's pretty much the Israeli leadership, right? There are those who want to, colonize more of Gaza, and those just want to leave it in ruins. Like, that's the main difference, I imagine, inside the ruling coalition. There's no significant force inside the Israeli government that wants the people of Gaza to remain. As far as I know, it seems like they're pretty united behind ethnic cleansing.
Yeah. And so that's thanks to the U.S. giving Israel total impunity.
Yeah.
Because Israel faces no consequences for constant expansion in the West Bank, for the brutal repression that was taking place, unprecedented repression since the Second Intifada prior to October 7th. Because of that, fanatical right-wing figures come to power, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, because the Israeli public sees no downside in voting for the most extreme nationalists and taking everything they can and abusing Palestinians as much as they want. Everything the U.S. has done has led us to the present moment, and you just hear it distilled perfectly by Matthew Miller, the spokesman for a Democratic administration. We don't need to apply any pressure. Reality is the pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that not a scandal? And luckily, there's like 2 guys in the bullpen there at the State Department, or 3 people at the bullpen. Like, every time I go there, if it fills up, there's Matt Lee, Said Erekat, and that one guy with the man bun whose name I forget. I'll introduce myself next time. And they're the only ones asking tough questions. And then the rest of the press, Matthew Miller gets up and says like the craziest stuff about Palestine. The last time I was there, what's his name? Vedant Patel, his sort of stand-in, said that we continue to question the statistics of Palestinian deaths. He actually just got away with saying that. And they just say so much, and the press just doesn't even report it. The Arabic press does, but the U.S. press doesn't. So there it is. That's why we're here, That's why October 7th happened in like 2 seconds. Now here's another,
Well, I just want to say, and how are they responding to the few questions that they get, the few times that they get any kind of pushback? They're leaking false claims to make it look as if they're pressuring Israel. So this one came this week in NBC News to Andrea Mitchell, who's very close to the Biden administration. She reported that according to White House officials, Blinken told Netanyahu that ultimately there's no military solution to Hamas. Well, if that's the case, then why is Blinken supporting Netanyahu's final solution in Gaza if he actually believes that? If you don't believe there's a military solution, why are you rushing Netanyahu tank shells to massacre people with? Why are you blocking, as we just saw in the Senate this week, there was that vote to have a report by the State Department on Israel's compliance with international law. And that would put the U.S. on a possible path to condition military aid, it's a very meek measure. It wasn't even directly calling for conditions now, just to have a report about Israel's compliance. And of course, that was voted down. The Biden administration totally opposed it. So if they really believe there's no military solution, then why are they supporting this genocide? And the answer is they do believe in a military solution. They are 100% supporting Netanyahu. They just want to pretend otherwise.
They don't have any other solution. And they don't have any other solution to Netanyahu. We'll get into that in another segment about the kind of how the political crisis in Israel makes the whole U.S. concept of managing Israel untenable. And how the security concept of Israel has caused this political crisis. We'll get into that. Just to stick with the delusional thinking, if you can even call it thinking, of the Biden administration, which really reflects the thinking of the foreign policy establishment. The Biden administration took Ansar Allah, the real government of Yemen, off of the state sponsors or the State Department's list of terrorist organizations in 2021. And that was in order to initiate peace talks between Yemen and Saudi Arabia and bring that horrific conflict, which at the time was one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, if not the worst, to an end. And just this week, or this past week, they added Ansar Allah back to the State Department's list of terrorist organizations. And Netanyahu and Biden was asked about these airstrikes. It's because the U.S. is attacking Yemen, because Yemen is waging an intervention against genocide in Gaza, a real responsibility to protect military intervention, an actual humanitarian intervention, unlike the kind that the self-branded humanitarian interventionists in the Biden administration, like Samantha Power, did in Libya, attempted to do in Syria, did in Yugoslavia, did in Iraq, where they destroyed entire regions and left millions dead. This is a largely bloodless military intervention, and it would end right now if the Biden administration would just tell Israel, sorry, you're not getting any more tank shells, it's over. Oh, and by the way, they don't have any tanks in Gaza. What do you need tank shells for? You're just blowing children's heads off. You're just blowing up buildings for fun. But they won't do it.